Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another session from this Careers Fair. If it's your first session, don't worry, the previous sessions are available on the YouTube. You'll have the links if you signed up yourself, and your school will have all of the links if you want to go back and look at any of the amazing speakers. We are rejoined today by Lauren. Good morning, Lauren. How are you?
Morning, I'm well, thanks.
So yesterday, Lauren was kind enough to join us to talk about CV writing and gave us loads of great tips. And I really mean us, because Marika and I have already restarted our CVs based on that advice. And then this morning, we're going to be looking at interview tips. So Lauren, I'll pass over to you to introduce yourself, your background, again, for anyone joining us new, and then we can get into interview tips.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. And hi to anyone who's back, and welcome to anyone who's new. I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Lauren. I am a recruiter in people operations at Google in London. People operations is our term for human resources. And I've been doing this type of work. I've been recruiting for about 10 years now. I'm American. I have lived in the UK for quite a long time. I went to university here and school here. So I'm familiar with the process that a lot of you, I think, are going through. And not only that, I have been in plenty of interviews myself, probably 50 plus, and I have conducted and interviewed at this point hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I've seen it all. But I'm really happy to be delivering this session today. And some of this is a little bit specific to Google, and I'll note when that's happening. But I think a lot of it can be translated into a lot of other companies as well. And we take a relatively structured approach to interviewing. So I hope that it provides you with a bit of structure and a bit of insight. And we'll go through about 20 minutes of content, and then I want to save plenty of time for questions at the end. So please do send them through, and then we'll address those at the end of the session. And we have some sort of frequently asked questions as well. Should we move into the slides?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think in terms of, I know the Google interview process is quite involved and quite deep. So if they get Google advice, I think that would probably stand them in good stead for lots of other scenarios. Okay, cool. I'll pass over to you. Yeah, let me know, Lauren, when you want to move on with either a nod or a little nudge.
Yeah, let's move to the next slide, please, then. Thank you. So interviews, they are stressful, they are scary. I would usually say at this point in the session, put your hand up if you've ever been nervous in an interview or you're nervous to have your first one. But since I don't see anyone, I'll just have to assume that there are a few nodding of the heads or hands up in your classrooms, but it's completely normal. I've had, like I said, so many interviews. Some went well, some went badly. It's usually pretty hard to tell. What I've never had is an interview prep session, what I had never had when I started out was an interview prep session or a workshop like this. So well done for showing up and for listening. I think it's so beneficial to have a bit of prep and be here today. And the first tip I have is to be prepared. Truly, you can anticipate 90% of the questions that are going to come up in any interview, and you can have some core examples prepared. And I would say you really have to know this stuff like the back of your hand, and you have to practice. So use your mentors, use your friends, use your parents if you can bear it. You're going to be nervous, and practice will help you, whether it's your first interview or your 20th. So practice, practice, practice. And before any big interview or presentation now, I actually record myself practicing, and then I listen back to myself so that I can hear how it sounds and make any changes. So I cannot stress this enough. And you have to research the company that you're interviewing for. You have to look at their company website, speak to anyone that you know from that company, and really prove that you showed up knowing the company that you're interviewing for, the role that you're interviewing for, and that you did your research and that you are truly interested. This company wants to think that you want them, and that will help them want you. So do your research and practice. Super. I think we double skipped. Perfect. So this is what we look for at Google, these 4 things, and I'm going to go into each of them in a bit more detail now. And we we assign an attribute, so one of these four, to an interviewer before an interview. But I think that this information, to Ben's point, is pretty relevant across the board. So if you prepare yourself for these things, I think you're covering a lot of bases, and you're covering yourself for a lot of potential questions that could come up in any interview. So those four things that we look for we call them general cognitive ability. That's how a candidate thinks. Leadership skills, role-related knowledge, and Googliness, which is good culture. And I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail now. On the next slide is general cognitive ability, how a candidate thinks. So this is really, can you break down a complex issue? So we ask open-ended questions. They're called hypothetical questions, to learn how you approach and solve a problem. And there's usually not a right answer. Your ability to explain your thought process and how you use data to make decisions is what is most important. So my suggestion to questions like this, they can feel like brain teasers. We don't do brain teasers, but if you were to get one, breaking down the problem, writing down notes, asking follow-up questions, making sure you understand, and then breaking down the problem and coming to a solution in that way. So an example question for that would be something like, imagine you're in this situation, what would you do to resolve it? So it's not necessarily drawing on your past experience, it's a new situation, and we want to see how you would think through it. And then the next one is leadership skills. So how you manage tasks, how you get things done, how you work as a team, how you strive for self-development. And we really want to know how someone has flexed different muscles in different situations in order to mobilize a team. This might be a team at school on a project, or it might be a team that you were on in the work environment, or a team that you were managing or indirectly managing. Just any example of where you stepped up and showed some leadership within an organization or within a school, even if you weren't officially appointed as the leader. So that could be something like, tell me about a significant issue or an obstacle that you faced at work or in school in the last year, and the steps that you took to overcome it. And we'll work through in a minute how you structure the answers to these types of questions. And then the next one is role-related knowledge, which is pretty straightforward. This is about reading the skills required from the job description to do the job. Do you have the skills needed to perform in the role? So read through that job description. In the CV workshop, we talked yesterday about tailoring your CV to highlight skills that you have that match the skills on the job description. And this is your opportunity to talk about them. And, I can pretty much guarantee that in any interview, there is going to be a question probably at the beginning, tell me about yourself and walk me through your background. And this is where you talk about the work experience you've done, the teams that you've been on, and this is your moment to just know your stuff like the back of your hand. You should have this stuff nailed down in practice before you go into any interview, with some big highlights along the way of things that you're particularly proud of. And then the final one is Googliness. So this is about thriving in ambiguity, doing the right thing, valuing different perspectives. And Googliness is obviously particular to Google, but I think most companies, all companies, will have a culture. And I think it's a great question to be asking back to the interviewer, and we'll get to this at the end, but how would they describe their company culture? I get it a lot from candidates when I interview candidates. And we want someone who thrives in ambiguity. So that means, is able to adapt to change. COVID was a huge change to the way that we did business at Google, and being able to continue to do your role, same for you at school, being able to show up at school on the video or whatever it was, that's thriving in ambiguity and being able to continue on in difficult times and changes. We want people to do the right thing, do them when no one is looking, do them when people are looking, don't be looking for credit. And we want people to be adding to our culture. So yesterday, again, we spoke a bit about culture add versus culture fit. Everyone is unique. Everyone has their own story. And when any company is hiring, they are hiring because they have a gap. And it is so important to bring to the table your full self and your unique self, and show who you are, and show and demonstrate what you can add to an organization. So a question around a Googliness question or a culture question might be something like, tell me about a time from work or from school when a team member or a peer wasn't performing as well as you wanted them to, or you hoped, and how you handled the situation. So if you had a tricky teammate, how do you address that with them so that you can continue to see the project through to the end? Next slide, please. We're going to move into some interview tips. So these are just some tips to help you in an interview. I think that they're all pretty relevant to any interview process, and I'll go through them now. But be confident in your abilities. And I think confidence comes with practice. So understand the skills that you have, understand how you can add to the organization and how you meet the requirements that they are looking for, and be confident. Practice what you want to say and what message you want to get across. Be familiar with the dates and achievements on your CV. No one is going to try and trip you up. I hope no one is going to try and trip you up in the interview process, but know your dates. Have a copy of your CV in front of you as well, so that you and the interviewer are looking at the same thing. And with that comes being honest. Make sure that you are telling the truth. And of course, you want to embellish and tell a story that is exciting and about you, but please, be honest and take credit where it's due. And I would encourage those of you who are on the modest side of things to make sure that you are talking about achievements that you have had when you've had them, but also highlighting where you've had team achievements. And striking a good balance of both of those things is really important. You're going to be nervous, so take a breath before you launch into an answer. When the interviewer is speaking, is your time to breathe, and remember to do that. Be concise, keep to the point. It's a conversation. Try and read the room and try and read the interviewer. It's tough on video. It's even tougher on the phone. So if you're able to have a video interview or an in-person interview, I highly, highly recommend it rather than a phone call. And I think the caveat there is phone calls seem less scary, right? Because no one's looking at you and you can have your notes in front of you, whatever it is. But you can have notes in front of you on video, and you can have notes in front of you when you go into an interview. I've never gone in without notes, so don't be afraid to have those to prompt you. But yeah, keep to the point. Don't go on for too long. Let the interviewer ask follow-up questions and let them speak. Use data and numbers where you can. I cannot stress enough how impactful it is to be able to bring numbers into your CV or bring numbers into an interview process. And I think people struggle with this because they think they don't have data, but I promise you it's there. No matter what it is, no matter what job you were doing, there's a number in there somewhere to get in. So do use it if you can. And then show enthusiasm and ask questions. I have some sort of top tips that I do that I think are really helpful to keep me confident, keep me excited, and also keep me relaxed. And I say things like, that's such a great question, or, oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so glad you asked me that. And having a couple of those up your sleeve, and I'm sure I'll do it in this session at the end, having a couple of those up your sleeve is just a really nice, comfortable go-to. And it helps you demonstrate that you are excited to be in the room, excited to be having the conversation, and it takes away some of the nerves as well. So I highly recommend good question, or I'm so excited to be here, or I'm so glad that you asked me that, or something that you make up on your own that's, your calling card. And then we're going to go into a minute, some real structure using the STAR method, which you may or may not be familiar with, but situation, task, answer, result. Actually, let's click to the next slide and get into that because this is super helpful. And it's something that I try and remind myself of time and time again, because it really takes you back to the basics of structuring any answer. So imagine you had a question. Tell me about a time when you were a member of a team that didn't achieve its goal. That's the interviewer asking you. You now need to explain the situation very clearly. This interviewer has no idea what you're talking about. Explain the situation. We were in a team of 5 people. This is the assignment that we were given. This is the organization I was a part of. Then you talk about the task. We divided up the project into separate parts with specific owners based on people's skills and experience. Then you talk about the action that you took. This is how we approached the problem. We met up a week before the submission deadline to put our parts together, only to find that one of our team members did not complete their section and they went on vacation. We've all had this, right? There's a weak link, and you need to work around it so that you can get to your result. We lost 20% of the available marks for that project, but I learned from that experience to do more regular check-ins with group members going forward so that wouldn't happen again. An amazing example of thriving in ambiguity, of learning from a mistake, of learning from an experience. It happens to everyone. No one is perfect. So this is a really concise, structured way to approach a question, and it gives full context to the interviewer. It assumes that they know nothing, and you tell them a really good story with some data, the 20%, the 5 members of the team. It's a really simple way to get a structured answer into your interview process. And then coming to the end, some interview basics. Some of these seem really obvious, but you would be, I think, surprised and maybe horrified to know how many people don't do some of these things. Relax as much as you can. Again, I know you'll be nervous, but deep breaths are so helpful. I have breathing exercises that I use. I have power poses that I use. I think it's called the Superman or the Superwoman. There's probably 2, but making yourself big and standing up straight in front of a mirror and thinking positive thoughts. It rewires the brain. It is so helpful. I do it before so many different things, and it really gives you a bit of a zing before you go into a meeting or into an interview. So I highly recommend it. Be on time. Again, there is, to me, nothing worse there is no worse first impression than someone who hasn't respected your time and who is late. And the same thing goes for an interviewer. They should try and be on time too. So if you're on the other end of the table one day, the advice is the same. Be early if you can. Be prepared. We talked about this at the beginning. Do your homework. Learn about the company for which you are interviewing. Understand the role as much as you can before you go in, and practice your answers. Be enthusiastic. Some of those things I said, tell the interviewer how excited you are to be there. Tell them how grateful you are to be there and why. Communicate your thoughts. Have some things prepared that you really want to get across. Have 5 or 6 stories or things that you've done or questions ready to go that you want to get across, and have them on a piece of paper in front of you if you want to make sure that you go through them. But, really try and tell the story that you went in wanting to tell. Maintain professional brand. Understand what kind of company you are interviewing for. Are you interviewing for a bank? Are you interviewing at a tech firm? Are you interviewing at a law firm? Are you interviewing at a shop? What is the vibe of that place, and how should you be presenting yourself? And my advice there is be yourself, but also make sure that you're kind of leveling to the professional expectation that is there. Follow up with your interviewer. Again, you'd be surprised at how many people don't do this. Most of these interviewers will be meeting a lot of people for each role, or each position or university place, whatever it is, and a follow-up email or a follow-up note never goes amiss. And then the last one is really be yourself and share your story. Again, you want to tell a story of you. Be honest, be truthful, show off a bit. We have something at Google that has now rolled out externally as well. It's called I Am Remarkable. And the first thing we tell people is that it's not bragging if it's based on facts. So please don't be shy. There are some of us who are more inclined than others not to show people and tell people how remarkable you are, but you really are. So make sure that you go in feeling that way and trying to tell the story of you. And that's it. I have a couple of questions here that are sort of frequently asked, and maybe I'll use as icebreakers, but would really love to take some questions from the group as well. Do we have any, Ben, that have come through so far?
Yes, we've got a few questions if you want to go to those first.
Great, let's take one.
Cool. So actually, I mean, one of the questions that came through is this one: how do I control my nerves during an interview? So you were ahead of the game on that one. But maybe if we go to another one first, which is...
Well, I can take one if you like. It's a good one.
Okay, let me go back. Let's go with nerves.
Yeah.
That's probably fairly common.
We spoke about it a bit. It's so common. I think that's the first thing to say. Like, unless you are... like I was going to say, unless you're a professional interviewer. I guess I am a professional interviewer. And I still get really nervous. I get nervous when I interview. I get nervous when I'm interviewed. You just have to find mechanisms that help you cope. You know, whether it's, like I said, the breathing exercises or the power poses or the practicing till you're blue in the face. Whether it's like an essential oil, you know, going for a run, going for a walk, talking to someone you care about. Whatever it is that calms you down, do that before you go in. And then breathe and have a couple of things that you are ready to say and that you know and you feel confident in.
Superb. And I think, yeah, just nerves is normal. Nerves, I mean, a lot of people talk about being nervous shows that you care. So, and I imagine for a lot of the Google interviewees that you get, they've been through a long process. There's a lot of applicants. They probably really, really want the job. So I suppose you see it all the time.
Yeah, true.
Maybe on a similar theme, what if you don't understand the question that's being asked?
Great question. Happens all the time. I just did it. I did the great question. But it is a good one. Ask the interviewer to repeat the question. Take a breath, take a note. If there's a word you don't understand, get clarification. You know, you are not going to answer a question well if you didn't understand the question. So just ask them to repeat themselves or ask it in a different way. Nothing wrong with that.
Perfect. Yeah. I think sometimes people do get a bit nervous about just being honest and saying, I mean, I have it with, you know, the third time you have to ask someone to repeat their name because you had that moment. I get that one a lot. Perfect. Okay, so that's a couple of our questions. Let's see what else we have got. This one seems like a good one. If you're not successful in getting the job, should I ask for feedback?
Absolutely. You might not always get it. Again, at Google, we always give feedback where we can. And I think some organizations do, some organizations don't, but ask for it. And if it's offered to you, take it. Definitely. And
awesome.
Taking feedback well is a gift. Feedback is a gift. So take that feedback and take it to heart. You may not agree with it. It may not be something that you want to change your behavior because of, but take it.
And is it fair to say that when you're doing the interviews for Google positions, that seeing someone that takes feedback well, I assume that's a trait that you're looking for in a lot of the candidates as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that does take practice because, you know, feedback can be rough. But yeah, it's definitely a good quality.
Actually, on that theme as well, we are welcoming the feedback for all of these sessions. There's a feedback form, and we took it on the chin on Monday and we improved on Tuesday, I think. So hopefully we continue to do that as well. Awesome. And we talked about nerves then. How does Google's culture differ from other tech companies? Over to you, Lauren, on that one.
Whoever asked this, I love it because I had said, you know, this is something that I get asked a lot. So I've never worked at another big tech company. I have worked I've worked in financial services, and I've worked for a publishing house, and I've worked at a smaller headhunting firm, recruiting firm. And the biggest difference that I have seen, the biggest culture difference I've seen in my experiences is the trust that Google puts in its employees. You know, we do have a very structured interview process. I don't think it's as long as some people think. You usually have about 4 interviews, but that's a lot. No, it's a lot of time. And once you're in, the trust that the company has in you to just behave like an adult and to do the role that you were hired to do is really extraordinary and extremely empowering. And it doesn't feel like, you know, you're in any sort of trial period. It feels like you got the job and off you go. And there is so much opportunity to try new things. And this was something that really impacted me in my interview process. And I thought, I really want to work in an organization where it's okay to fail. It's okay to have an idea that doesn't work well. And there's an entire process in place to, I forget the name of it. There's an entire process in place to sort of post-mortem if something doesn't go well, so that you can improve on it for next time or learn from that. So it's just, there's just so much freedom to do what you want to do and what you think is the right thing.
Myself and actually one of your colleagues, Dean, who spoke at the beginning of this whole process, often refer to X, that the former part of Google, part of Alphabet, that kind of deals with crazy projects like Project Loom and all those kind of things. And our understanding that internally there is that they reward failure. So if you kill a project, that essentially gives you like a raise or a bonus or lots of accolades across the organization, because you have done everything you possibly can. You've shown it's not possible. You kill your project, and that's a big success at their organization. So interesting concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got a follow-up question from Bless, which is it easy to break into the tech sector without having a typical STEM background?
Yes.
I think you've got lots of answers for this one.
I love that question. Yes, I think something we've talked about in these mentoring and coaching sessions is having, I work at a tech firm, but I barely know how to turn on my phone. I definitely don't have a STEM background. I studied business at school. I could have studied anything and done this job. So I think what's really important to stress here is it is possible to work in a tech company in a non-technical role. So at Google, we have, people operations where I sit. We have a partnerships organization that works with our external partners. A lot of those people don't have tech backgrounds. We have an entire sales organization that don't have tech backgrounds. So absolutely. And just, spoke about this a bit in the CV workshop, finding what brings you joy and what you are good at is what will, I think, make you successful in the long term, because you will be doing something that doesn't feel like a job. But it's tough. It can be tough to find that, and if you aren't growing up feeling like I'm going to be a Google recruiter when I'm older, which I definitely didn't. It can take a while, but just be gentle with yourself. And if you do want to be in a technical role and you do want to have an engineering role, then it's a different story, right? I think you need to be able to code and you need to be able to do these things, but working in a tech firm does not require a STEM degree.
Awesome. And just to actually jump back to Bless's previous question, I know Marika, Lawrence and I really, really enjoyed your quote that both yesterday and today about cultural add rather than cultural fit. And I was doing some mock interviews with students at a school in North London, and we were talking about the culture of a company, and it was really interesting to see that the girls I was speaking to were like, oh, I don't like the sound of that, because for them, their culture meant their family, their community, and cultural fit sounds like they're trying to sort of change that. So I cannot love that. I love that. The cultural add is one of my big takeaways from this. And hopefully that for all the students out there who really value their culture and what they bring, I think that's a really nice message to remind them that you are adding to the organisation you're joining rather than having to fit to it. So that was a big one for us.
And I think that's a big one to focus on. And again, it takes time. And it took me 10 years, I think, to recognize the importance of this for myself. And I sort of woke up one day and didn't feel aligned to the culture of the company I was in. And then I found one that I did. So it can take a long time. And it's important to be asking all of those questions right up from the beginning, if this is important to you. and to make sure that you find something that aligns with you and where it feels right.
We're obviously sort of coming towards the end of the session. So we had a question earlier from Gerald, which was, do you have to remember all the answers to the questions during the interview? I'm interpreting that as, if we go back to your point, was you take your CV along to the interview.
Yeah, I think, Gerald, does this mean, like, do you have to be rehearsed and have something prepared? My response is have some stock answers ready to go. Going through your background should be ready. You're ready to roll that out as soon as someone asks you. Tell me about a time when you were in a leadership role. Tell me about a time when you experienced failure and you had to overcome it. Like, these are things that everyone has a response to, and most interviewers are going to ask, why do you want this job? So yes, there are some things that you need to have remembered or have rehearsed, but there are some questions like that, how do you think? The kind of the brain teasery stuff that you're not going to be ready for. Just be ready to have a STEM answer.
Lauren, can I just jump in and quickly ask, on the back of that then, and one of the questions that came in about if you're not successful to answer feedback, is it okay to, if you don't get the job, to ask for a copy of the questions, or during your interview, ask for a copy of the questions? I know some people might be funny about that, but I don't know.
I've never had that question, and I've never had someone request them. So I don't see why not. Some companies, interview questions are probably proprietary. So they may not want to share them, but you're welcome. You're always welcome to take notes. The interviewer is taking notes, so you should feel free to do the same. Cool. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
Just as a closing then, I don't know if you've got maybe a few teachers there with their classes. So just as a final point, could you, maybe something they can take away after this session, can you give a few examples of the types of questions that someone might give in an interview? And then maybe students, maybe you can start asking each other over break and lunch, and do some practice on the way.
I mean, mock interviews are so important, as I said, so you should definitely be doing these as you're getting ready to interview. A few questions that you would get in an interview. Tell me about your background is going to come up. Tell me why this job is interesting to you is going to come up. And in that, you've done your company research, you have the skills that you have learned and that will apply to the role. You're ready to do that. Around leadership, tell me about a time when you've led a project or a team. Around failure, tell me about a time when something didn't go as planned and how you overcame it. I think those are some pretty good starting points. Tell me about an achievement that you're particularly proud of. And these are all questions that you can have stock answers for. And they are all questions that might be asked in a slightly different way, but you can sort of loop back to what you had planned, which I do all the time.
And I think for the students watching, if you're in a sports team or an extracurricular team, or you've done some project work, all of those things that you're doing at school already, I feel like they have relevance. You've worked in a team, you've worked with people you didn't want to, that you had to kind of suggest maybe they do something different to try and get them to contribute. You've rallied people up on the pitch. All of these things feel like very similar scenarios. So I hope the students realise they are doing these things. They are dealing with failures and overcoming them. And obviously that can be used as well if they're just going into their first ever interview without any work experience. Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone's contributions and time. Lauren, thank you again for joining us. It's been really, really valuable and lots of stuff for all of the young people to learn from. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone who's watching. Have a great time, everyone. We'll see you for the next session where we're going to be looking at university applications, so around UCAS forms. So one for the slightly older students, but if the year 8s want to get ahead of the game, then feel free to. So thank you, Lauren.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. And thank you, everyone else. We'll see you for the next session at 11:30.